Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome to Life Chiropractic. We're doing self-shoulder massage. So the first part we're going to talk about anatomy, talk about the different muscles involved, the nerves involved, and then we're going to get into some practical stuff that you can do yourself at home. All this will be up on the website, so for review, and the video will be there for you guys to review. And then there's a whole series of frozen shoulder from another chiropractor that's also on the website. They're sort of longer. It's 5 videos that are about 6 minutes each, so those are also already on the website for your reference. Okay, so the shoulder is a pretty complex thing, and what I'm most interested in is your nervous system, and relating what's going on into the shoulder, what is related to other things in other places. So the nerves that innervate all of the muscles of your shoulder and the shoulder joint itself come out of the neck. It's something called the brachial plexus, and this is a big player in a lot of stuff that happens not only in the shoulder but all the way down the arm. And so you have all these different nerve roots that they have a complex series of highways, just like the maze up in Berkeley, and sometimes traffic gets stopped up because of what's going on around it. And we're going to talk about the different muscles that play into that. But the brachial plexus, and then each of these nerves goes to innervate a different muscle. So as your chiropractor, I'm concerned about your neck's alignment and the freedom of those nerves to communicate with those muscles. So if your neck is out of alignment, it can be impinging on the communication of those nerves to those muscles. So if there's a shoulder injury, there can be neck involvement in that shoulder injury and recovering it. So wanted to just get into some basic shoulder anatomy, the bones that are involved. You have the clavicle, which is coming across here, people known as the collarbone. You have your scapula, which is this big triangular shaped bone that has kind of a very complex shape. And then you have your humerus, which is your long bone. It's connected to the funny bone. That's why it's called humerus. I am not a good comedian. I stick to my J-bow and be a chiropractor, which I'm much better at. I always found it interesting. The only bony attachment for the entire arm is actually it's called the sternoclavicular joint. It's where the clavicle meets the sternum. Things are often named for the parts that connect them or their shape. So your whole arm is only connected to your body at this little tiny joint right here. Everything else is muscles and ligaments. The other joints of the shoulder are the glenohumeral joint. Nobody will be quizzed on the anatomy, but that's the joint between your arm bone and your scapula, and the clavicle also attaches at what's called the acromioclavicular. The acromion is just a part of the scapula that sticks up. So if you just feel your own shoulder, that very bony tip, also as you get in there, one of the massage therapists that I like to work with calls this a dusty corner. So where it's a triangle and in there's sort of a knot of tissue and it's a dusty corner that doesn't get a lot of attention. So cleaning out the dusty corners can help you feel better. And if you have, if any of those joints are out of place, that's something that I can help get fixed back into line. Another joint, sort of a semi-joint, but it's the relationship of the scapula to the rib cage. Now it's not a bone-to-bone connection like the glenohumeral joint or the clavicle to the sternum, but there is a definite relationship on how the scapula relates to the rib cage and how it glides. And I hope that that's my next slide. It is scaption, or the scapuhumeral rhythm. So the scapula should move up and out in a circle and also hug the body. So we aren't in a flat plane of glass, so sometimes we try to imagine ourselves in 2D, but the scapula aren't flat to our body, they're hugged around, and that's our scapular angle. When we move our arms and our shoulder, ideally we're moving in that plane. So when you try to move in a flat plane, you're moving outside of your best biomechanical practices. So, and everybody's scapula are shaped a little bit different. So if you're in an exercise class or you're trying to move your arms around, you want to think about coming off the curvature of your own body into a place that's comfortable, and you're going to get the best movement in that plane. So if you're having trouble with movement of your shoulder, check your scapular angle and you might find more ease if you get in your own biomechanical plane of action. And the scapula, as we get into the different muscles, scapular motion is very, very important for arm and shoulder motion. So if your scapula is stuck and not moving properly, your arm cannot function properly. And that's where you get, so the glenohumeral joint is about 120 of that 180 degrees, and 60 degrees comes from that scapular motion. And there's a rhythm to it as it moves, and that's something that I'll check in the office if you guys have come in for shoulder stuff, is you feel how the scapula moves. Do they both move smoothly? Are they in time with the rhythm of the arm? So, muscles, what we're here today is to address some self-massage. You have this big muscle along here is your trap, and it's divided into different portions. You have the upper trap, the middle trap, and the lower trap. You can see it covers a lot of territory, and it does different motions. So your upper trap can make your shoulder go up, and the lower trap makes the trap go down. And they're gonna have other muscles that help them out. So in this picture, so we've got the upper, middle, and lower trap. We have the rhomboids on the other side. So underneath the trap, if you were to just take them off, you're gonna see other muscles underneath. The rhomboids, they're shaped like a rhomboid, that's why they're called. And then the levator scapula, it's named that because it lifts your scapula. And that attaches, so you see a lot of the muscles attaching to the scapula also attach to the spine as well as the base of the skull. And then this big muscle right here that intersects with the lower trap is called the latissimus dorsi. So here's our first active practice, is the first release point is at the base of the skull. You can just take your thumb or your finger, and it's called sort of, you're gonna press and hold into tender points, and then you're gonna use your own body's motion to release it. So we're just gonna do little demos, and then when we're done talking about it all, we'll practice and I'll help you walk through it. So you're just gonna hold, and you can actually get onto all the muscles. And so whatever part that you're working on, you're sort of just pinning it and then moving, sliding the muscles under your fingers to help get them to release. Our handy dandy tennis ball in a sock helps us to get to things that we can't reach, especially if we have a shoulder problem. It's going to be hard to get the shoulder into mobility to reach those places. So you use the tennis ball like this, and then you would use a wall. We'll find some wall space down there. But the sock helps you get it to different places, and you put it in there, and then you can sort of roll up and down. You can also move your body up and down, rounding and flexing. But so the upper trap, you use your thumbs at the base of the skull, your fingers along in the neck, and then you can use the tennis ball to work all along this lower and middle trap, as well as this intersection. Where muscles intersect is a very hot spot that can get a lot of relief, because muscles each should be in their own bag called fascia, and sometimes they get stuck together. So muscles that should be sliding are then stuck and pulling each other in, they're gluing together, it's creating inflammation, and you're getting muscle motion that's not smooth the way it should be. And so by releasing the places in between where muscles are connecting or overlapping can help free up that gliding mobility. And then this other muscle we're going to talk about later on towards the end is the deltoid, but it wraps all over the shoulder. It's an important one. So the rotator cuff. This is a big one that people are familiar as causing problems. You hear that a lot, and I have a rotator cuff injury. And the cuff is just made up of 4 muscles that basically create like a cuff around the shoulder. They come from the front and the back, and they sort of hug the shoulder this way. So you have, the acronym is called SITS, because it's SITS, the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the subscapularis, and the teres minor. I don't think I said that in SITS order, but basically what they do is you have a couple muscles coming from the front and back of the scapula. So if you have your scapula, there's muscles that lay here, and then there's muscles that lay in between your rib cage and your scapula and then come out and wrap around. Some of them do internal rotation, some of them do external rotation. So if you're having a lot of trouble with those motions, getting at the rotator cuff muscles can help to release those. Tennis ball in a sock is helpful for the ones that are laying on the outside of the scapula, but to get to the hardest muscles to work on yourself are the ones that are in your armpit. And I don't know if I put that in here, but we're also going to talk about the serratus anterior. It lays with the subscap, but instead of attaching to the humerus, it attaches to the rib cage. So the way to get into that is kind of just leaning forward, and you stick your finger into your own armpit. And if you want to get the rib cage muscles, you stick into the armpit and then press onto the rib cage this way. And again, you're just sort of pressing and pulling, and you can try to move the arm and move the rib cage. And then the other one is you're going to press and push back out towards the scapula. It's a little bit hard to see for a video. I sometimes will use the thumb, but you can use the arm here, but you're either pushing back and out this way or back and in this way. And I'll help you guys find that as we work together. Muscles on the front. I know this is a big anatomy lecture, but I hope it's fun. Everybody can feel right up, again, where that your collarbone meets your sternum. You poke up and under. It's the subclavius muscle. It's a teeny muscle that lays underneath your collarbone and can cause lots of problems. Sometimes it's real tender. You're just sort of getting right up and under. Pecs is the big muscle that helps. It's our, everybody is very anterior heavy. We type, we drive, this is protective fear mode. But to get those to release, again, you just getting in, pulling down. And you can also, don't need the sock for this one, but you can use the tennis ball and you just lean into the wall or to the floor and you just find tender spots and roll around on it. So we want to talk about the deltoids. Again, here, same sort of thing. You're hitting the attachment points, but as you learn the anatomy, or you can go back and look at the picture and say, okay, it really hurts in this motion, and finding the where that muscle inserts into the bone and holding there, moving the arm, and then just pulling at those insertions, you're going to get a lot of relief. So the deltoid is all around here, and then it folds along here. And so also sometimes the attachment down here can be really tender and you can release it there. There's a muscle that gets right up under here, the coracobrachialis, so you can either get it right here on the arm or here in that triangle of awesome right here. And then another really important one is your biceps tendon. So if you hold your arm like this and move it back and forth, you're going to find sort of what feels like a band rolling back and forth on your humerus. And if it's really inflamed and tight, again, you can just massage as you move. Scalenes. Now, scalenes are a tender muscle and you don't always want to work on yourself, but you can feel up here these big ones. That's your SEM or your sternocleidomastoid. These are really good if you ever have a cold to rub, because it'll help the lymph move out of your head and neck. You can also, the scalenes are better off just to get in by stretching, and that's just, we did this in the last class, but leaning away, you can turn the head up and down, kind of like that, up and down the neck. But the scalenes, what we talked about at the beginning, that brachial plexus, the scalenes can actually pinch the brachial plexus and cause problems. And then at first, what we were talking about up here, in addition to hitting the upper trap, you have all these tiny little muscles that attach from your skull to your spine, and you can thumb and rotate to help them release. And lastly, one of my favorite parts is the rib cage. So shoulder problems can also link into lung problems because the musculature of the neck and the shoulder all anchor onto the rib cage. So if the rib cage and the breathing aren't happening appropriately, it can affect how the shoulder functions and how the neck functions. So, and that can, if you've had a cold recently, if you've had trauma, helping, and that same sort of getting into the in between and just pressing and pulling on all the places in between the rib cage. And then the diaphragm's ability to breathe up and down can affect shoulder because the shoulder is anchoring into the rib cage. Other stuff for shoulder, circumduction. If you do have like a real loss of range of motion in the shoulder and it's stable enough for your shoulder, you can hang and it's called circumduction. You stir the pot back and forth, and you can use a little weight. If you want to know if this is safe for you, don't hesitate to ask one of your health professionals. And the peel the onion is sometimes these problems have layers to them, and you've got to go through all of your points, and then you go through all of your points again, and you go through all of your points, and each time you're going to peel off a layer and get a little bit more freedom into the issue. And cranial nerve 11 is another one that comes out. It innervates. Most of the shoulder muscles are innervated by that brachial plexus. Cranial nerve 11 innervates that upper trap, which is a huge player in shoulder and scapular mobility. And by freeing up the muscles at the base of the skull, you're freeing up your cranial nerve 11. Any questions? You can turn this off.